Welcome to the SaaS Playbook. Today, I'm joined by Gena Dellett, a technology leader and CEO at Skvare. Gena brings a rare perspective at the intersection of systems thinking, consulting, and real-world implementation, helping organizations navigate complexity where technology meets people. Gena, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Taking a few steps back, before Skvare existed, what experiences or frustrations in your career shaped the way that you think about technology and the role it plays inside organizations?
Yeah. There was one experience when I was a baby adult. I would have been in my early 20s. And I was working at a regional healthcare organization. And we had a program that you would log your activity. You would log, like, I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to go for a run. You would log that. And it was sort of a company to company competition. And it used to just be totally paper managed and was well participated in. And then we switched to having it be managed by an online tool where you would log in. And then that was maintained really by one person. And I happened to be that one person. And of course, I was really proud that I got to maintain this thing that had this long history. But then it wasn't participatory anymore. And actually, the engagement of that as kind of a program decreased because there wasn't the same shared role or shared responsibility in information collection or even data entry as what there had been when it was kind of a paper form. And so how that translates now of when people have technology tools of what are the roles that others have in it, that it ends up being a really weak thing if it can and is only maintained or known about by this kind of special group of people that have a certain knowledge that is kind of behind this curtain that nobody else gets to know about. And so it's this funny memory of this baby adult who has a lot of pride of wow, how cool and important is my role to get to maintain this thing with all these different businesses submitting information, when I honestly don't even know if they did it the next year, if that may have even killed it as an initiative among other things. And so that's something that I try to be aware of now is the stakeholders at the table and that voices are collected and that the buy-in of any sort of system, because pencils aren't evil, paper is fine. It's okay to use that. And so a tool has to actually be then adopted and useful by more than just those that have the pride and skill set of doing some of the more technical behind the scenes maintenance things that are critical, but are more foundational to actually how the system's going to be used and leveraged broadly.
Yeah. I mean, I think you've touched on a few key points there. You are SaaS adjacent, but I think almost in a derivative in its own. The intention behind building Skvare is almost the same as SaaS businesses or SaaS founders, where they find there's so many tools out there, but unless they're actually going to be implemented and used and the uptake is there, it's just another feature that may confuse staff or teams that actually then reverses the intention behind it entirely. So it's really interesting. And I think you would appreciate as well in this industry, funny because another podcast guest said, there's so many feature factories out there, but how much does your client or your customer actually need and how much do they actually use?
Yeah, I mean, it's like kitchen utensils, right? I mean, the number of the ways to get the pit out of an avocado, all the fancy tools you can have for that versus hit it with a knife and spin it. I mean, you have a knife for other purposes, or it's the same way that we fill our physical life with different tools that may or may not always be useful. So I like that as a phrase. There's lots of feature factories. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to use that. He's like, yeah, go for it. You work closely with teams that don't always fit typical SaaS customer profiles. What do you think product-led companies often misunderstand about how technology actually gets adopted in the real world?
Yeah, I like that question because a lot of our work, as you mentioned, we're SaaS adjacent. We do a lot of work in open source software, and so a lot of organizations will come to us because either they have a kind of as an individual person, they have a really strong value alignment with what open source means, and they like the kind of control and ownership and flexibility that can come with it. What we look for is when we're talking to an organization, try to identify how it is that they see that they are special and different and unique, and not to challenge that or say that that's not true because that's not really relevant. It's neither here nor there. If they actually are unique in that way, it's important for us to kind of tease that out and hear how they see themselves as being different, when in reality, we actually are looking to see how they're like exactly the same as these other organizations. Like, especially in contact management, everybody collects a first name, last name, and email, right? And then there's like a lot of other fields that are collected as well, but there's a lot more that is similar between organizations than is different. And so I think what we have done more intentional work of is for the way that organizations will kind of self-select and see that they are different in this specific way or unique because of these specific attributes or the kind of work that they do, that the resources and examples that we can give to then meet their needs, if we can share that in a way that speaks to the alignment that they see of who they are. Like if you're talking to an arts organization, other arts organizations that have that similar thing, even if there's this membership association that is exactly the same from a technical functional standpoint of what's needed, that isn't going to translate as well for what they accept. And so I see that in the way different SaaS offerings will put together their documentation or user support, of having that targeted towards who that end user sees themselves as being, knowing that if you have that entry point of connection, any information that's going to be shared is it's going to be better taken in because, oh, this is for me, they get who I am. It's more specific, even if the instructions themselves or support is just as generic as it is if it was a totally different kind of organization.
So just to clarify, do you mean so in terms of their messaging and their key point of difference is what you help them identify?
Yeah. Because I think it's helpful for us to know how an organization sees themselves within the spectrum of all the different kinds of organizations that exist, and then have our language and our offering kind of match that. So there's an alignment. Then there, especially in technology, there's just a lot of vocab words that aren't always shared. And so conversations can be hard anyways when you don't have a shared language about technical concepts, which have their own, they have their own listing of all these words that aren't commonly used. And so at least that alignment at who you are, how are you going to use your system, you see you are similar to or different than, and then have that at least be a foundation of similarity to start from to then build on potentially a more technical conversation on top of. So it's not a totally new conversation.
It sounds like you want a lot more of an intentional approach, but also it's almost attacking it in a reverse perspective rather than this is what we think our language and our point of difference is. We go to market and then realize that there's so many other companies or businesses that are doing something similar. Therefore, now we have to go back to the drawing board and completely pivot what our service offering was.
Yes, well, and one great thing that in 2025 at Skvare is we engaged just a fantastic kind of communications and language firm. It was the first time we'd ever really done that to kind of evaluate our sales proposal language and some of the language on our website. And one thing that they really kind of challenged and pushed back on is that we were focused so much on the tool and what tools do and how we work, like naming our project management system and all these different things, like some of these details that really don't matter, and to switch instead to something that is more outcome focused, to acknowledge that we see who you are as a user, we get that experience, and then because of that, we do XYZ. But starting first with this acknowledgement of why any of this matters in the first place, instead of like, we're smart technical people. Which, like, yeah, get in line. Like, so is everybody else, like that's why we all have companies. Like, everybody's got technical skills, and yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny because sometimes I review some of the podcasts and I'm like, I don't think if you were not in the say SaaS space or SaaS adjacent, you would have no idea what we're talking about. And because there just happens to be so much abbreviations and so much jargon
Yes.
that no one else is going to understand. I'm like, well, really, the podcast is going to land on a lot of other SaaS founders and leaders within the space. I'm like, but in a way, I'm okay with that.
Yes. Yes. A special vocab.
Very, very much so. As someone who operates adjacent to SaaS rather than inside a single product, how do you decide when software is the right solution versus when humans or processes or change management matter more?
Yes. And that, I would say that is the occasional gift of even turning down work. And so one kind of outcome of what that can look like is if someone comes to us and they want a specific configuration of a certain software that we work in, and we don't think that that is going to actually deliver what it is that they want, it could be easy to think like, well, just take the project. They want to pay you to do this thing. Why don't you just do it? But then if you can see that they're not going to be satisfied, that can end up questioning invoices. The expectations are different than what the system can do. And so I think that there's a really important challenge there, whether someone's operating in the SaaS space or they're doing more kind of custom configuration of available tools, open source space, that thinking critically about is what they're proposing even reasonable within this solution that's been chosen. One thing that we've been really trying to pivot and do more often lately is also just help organizations get more out of what they already have. So my chief strategy officer, Sarah Robb on the team, she has this great way of saying it that for some organizations, it's almost helpful to know what it is that your tool that you already have can do. That reasonably, every system, like we talked about earlier, has a whole bunch of features. It has a whole bunch of things that it can do. And it's totally a normal thing that an end user is not going to know all of the things that their existing system can do. And so learning more about what is even possible. And then what she jokes is like, and then just try to want that. Like try to want what your system can do, or try to get the most out of it of what you can before you kind of throw your hands up and say like, well, I don't think we can do this. So we probably have to just like make a total change and have a whole new system. More organizations now than say 10 years ago, everybody has some sort of system for the most part, or they have their process for the most part. And so there are fewer of these big technology transformations where they're going from kind of low tech or very little tech to then their first system, like in the early days of getting to build that first professional website or actually move people from spreadsheets into a CRM system. There's not as many of them in a sense as there used to be. And I think pushing back and just not taking the work if you know it's not going to be a fit. And also making sure that organizations, individuals actually know what the capabilities of their systems are to see if actually maybe some of that can meet their need and they just didn't know about it. And that's more of an educational process. Yeah, than trying to introduce something new and shiny that may not be needed after all. Yeah.
I think people would maybe look at their current tech stack and be like, I'm bored of this. Like, can we do something different? And with short attention spans these days, it's always, what's new? What's the new tool? Right. But unless they actually talk to each other or they provide a specific outcome, I just don't think it's worth the whole build. And I think I agree with what you're saying. Being able to understand that, hey, maybe you should really look into what your current tech stack and what the functions can do would really actually help drive the conversation a little bit forward rather than trying to build something maybe just for one particular project.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there is an organization which I have now clocked it as kind of like note it as a red flag. They had been through a couple CRM systems before they spoke to us, and that was within just 1 year. They had already been through 2 different systems, and then neither of those were satisfactory. And so they were looking at changing to then a third one. Well, within about a year, that system is not satisfactory. And so that is something that really at that point doesn't relate to the technology. And it can, right? I'm not saying it's 100% not related to technology, but there's other ways of making decisions that are influencing a perspective on if this is a good enough tool.
I just wanted to add as well, it does actually come down eventually to actually educating that client, perhaps of like, hey, like maybe what are your expectations around what a CRM can and cannot do, and what are the automations and configurations that follow that? Because I think they're just, what's the common denominator? They just don't seem like they're satisfied. There's got to be a common denominator here, right? Because they keep going to different agencies, and imagine their team who having had to adopt a new CRM every single time, and how long and how much it affects the business. It's crazy.
Yes. Yeah, that's a lot of disruption and a lot of time spent on just setting up new tools that is not the actual mission of the organization mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't worked with any organization yet that like their mission is to set up their internal technology. Like that's not a thing. It's a function that has to be done to then do the other work. So it's always a kind of above and beyond normally what the core responsibilities are.
Yeah. Lots of different colorful organizations out there, aren't there?
Yeah, which is what makes every day fun and different. Yeah, I love it.
It's very innovative, but it's also very nimble, and it moves extremely fast. And that's kind of why I enjoy this space, because it's not like one product you sell and that's it. It's just the product will sell 100 times and it will still be there. The only difference is you make improvements.
And you make improvements. And if you don't know about improvements, then you may be dissatisfied about something that actually has been addressed. I mean, that's a really fun thing and an important part about communication and support. So there's some way that people are being exposed to what additional options they have now that they didn't have 3 years ago.
Maybe even 6 months ago, because the
Yes.
market
Yeah. 3 years. Oh my gosh.
things change really quickly in this space.
Catch up. Catch up, turtle. Yeah.
You've spoken openly about the dynamics of being a technical woman in sales and leadership conversations. How has that shaped the way you show up, you structure teams, or navigate credibility within the room?
Yeah. I feel really fortunate that there's only been a few really kind of standout instances where, like, whoa, you're just the salesperson, right? As if, like, also, it's like salespeople aren't bad. I mean, there's a lot of fun ways to look at that one and be kind of like arms crossed, amused and frustrated. And so, I've had a few moments where to be like very disappointed, surprised, frustrated about not looking the technical part as far as what may be assumed. I think what I've drawn from those experiences is just to have that much more confidence in myself and know that part of then if I know I'm prepared to have a call and I am showing up kind of proving that in how I hold myself in the way that I share information, the way I ask questions, then that ideally can be made clear. And if it is not made clear, or if it's received in some sort of way by whoever it is I'm talking to, maybe that means that there's kind of that's showing me something else about this isn't even a fit to work with this person. If this person is making these assumptions about who I am and what my role is or what is appropriate for a role, then I can also act on that information and kind of excuse myself from like, I don't think we're the best fit. Another thing is just an opportunity to reach out. There are lots of really fantastic female executives in the tech space. And I think I've been much more bold in just reaching out to others that I perceive as being kind of ahead or further along or just doing things that I'm really impressed at and motivated by to reach out because all they could do is just also not reply to my email. Like that's not a loss in a sense, or they do reply. And so it's also lowering this bar of what does risk even look like? Like after the fact, when you press send on an email, then like that didn't feel risky at all. It's just like this emotional buildup in beforehand to express that. So I've definitely had a more kind of defensive or felt like I was like unique or felt awkward. And I feel like I've gotten rid of a lot of those emotions just with practice of that it's not useful to hold on to that, or it's likely influencing then how I show up in some way that is counterproductive to how I just need to, be with other people. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think naturally women are much more emotional creatures, right? So we feel things first and then we have to rationalize ourselves out of things. And I just wanted to quickly take a note that Gena is the first female on the podcast. So
Woo,
yay.
woo.
Yay, the girls. But also, I think what you touched on there is I actually experienced that a lot going into a corporate space. So being a person of color as well really didn't help the situation in the terms of expectations and how I thought that they were going to respond and getting this high level of anxiety before I've even spoken, right? And it's just kind of, I think that lays on the fact of you're trying something new. And sort of going back to what you said about, having no issues or being a little less risk averse of reaching out to someone else that's maybe further along. I think that's just something that you just have to practice and you just have to just go straight through the middle and just experience it to realize, oh, it's really not that bad.
And then it says practice. And then when, like your chair doesn't blow up that you're sitting on because you pressed an email to send to someone or, whatever these things that like anxiety tells us is going to happen that like doesn't happen, then it's maybe easier the next time to do it. I do that often, or just even in the sales process of just what an emotional roller coaster it can be where you have really great conversations with people, but that doesn't actually mean anything in a sense. Like they could have great conversations with so many people. I actually was just yesterday, I was talking with a team member because we had gotten really excited about the proposal that we had put together and sent to a prospective organization. And they ended up going with another provider, which happens is a normal thing. And they actually sent like a very friendly longer rejection email than what we even sometimes get, which is a win.
Yeah.
And so it was the roller coaster emoticon response from the team of just devastated. And I was I was kind of making the equivalent comparison to, it's like you go on like speed dating or something and you have 50 great conversations and you're walking down the sidewalk and you're feeling really, really jazzed. And then you realize you don't have a single phone number. And that's sort of what the sales process can feel like sometimes, where you're just like all so excited about the potential of what working together could open up and make better for all these organizations. And then you don't know where it's going to go. And so how you kind of manage yourself then to kind of stay appropriately excited and engaged while also not thinking that this is, you can't be devastated by what the result is by having that emotional connection to the potential work.
There's this thing about salespeople is you have to have an extremely thick skin or be
Yes.
extremely resilient in order to prosper.
To
in
be
this space.
rejected constantly. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Always seek the no almost, and then you won't be upset. But also the worst you can get is a no, right? And that's what I
Exactly.
learned really early on. If I don't ask, I have a no anyway, technically speaking.
Yes.
If I ask and I get a no, at least then I know I've done the best that I could possibly do in order to possibly attain or acquire another client, right? So that's how my brain initially thought about sales, because I started off in door-to-door sales, mind you. So if you can do door-to-door sales, you can do anything almost.
Yes.
And I was selling waste management. So that's where it really started for me.
Yes.
And then I was like, oh, I could do this. Like I could nail this. And look
Jenny,
where we are now.
I sold newspaper ads. I went door to door to businesses. And when I was like 22 or 23, I sold newspaper ads, like the little boxes and the printed weekly newspaper, a couple towns over from where I live. Yeah, if you can walk into a business and ask them to like, will you spend $48 on this newspaper ad? And they're like, no. And then you have to walk out with your head up. Yes, absolutely. We come from the same roots.
Yeah, come from the same leather.
Yeah.
But it's just, I think a lot of successful salespeople start off in a very similar trajectory, in the sense that you have to, because I think that's the first initiation. If you can't get through the door-to-door sales, it's very unlikely that you enjoy it first and foremost, but you're going to see that as a long-term career. But I was appreciative of that. I was like, you know what? If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be where I am now. So I'm thankful for that.
Yes. That's great.
When you think about scaling, whether that's product, service, or team, what tensions or trade-offs tend to surface first for most people that most people don't anticipate?
What tensions surface? That's really great. And more related to SaaS, we'll have initiatives internally at different times of, we have this great idea for this feature. And if we build it, everybody's going to come and want this feature. And one, I don't believe that that's a thing, because like we talked earlier in this conversation, there's feature factories all over the place. And I think what is kind of disappointing and surprising, especially for my incredibly talented technical team, is all of that human work and communication and marketing and getting in front of kind of the right people or right sectors, or how you actually promote, that is so distinct from the development of the tool itself. Of that, we see tools out there that aren't that special, but have really great language and marketing and a lot of promotion, when there might be something that is better than that, but doesn't have that wraparound. It just doesn't seem as legitimate then, when it doesn't have that kind of polish. And so having to put both of those things together from a technical standpoint. One thing that we've been really looking into more, and I've been working on just relationship cultivation, is actually different kind of partnerships within the SaaS space, because we know customer service, we know customer support, and where people get confused, and that just because we have fancier tools all the time doesn't mean that humans are naturally better at using tools necessarily, or that they want to have to learn how to use tools. And so even developing partnerships or alignment of like, hey, we know where humans get tripped up, and this is a great tool, but they're still going to get tripped up by it. And we can be there to answer their questions in a way that maybe your business model doesn't have an ability to provide that kind of support, because that's a different kind of business model to provide that kind of one-on-one specialized service to individual organizations in comparison to other models of just having a product offering and support around that product. And so I think putting teams together where they actually see the full picture of what it means to expand into something different or expand into something new or develop out a new feature or product, of all of the things that make that a success, is a lot more varied and complex than what it ever is when you're first excited about the initial idea of how it's going to be transformative in whatever specific space you're in. So that was something that, you get really excited and then you back off when you realize actually how difficult it's going to be. Like, do we really want to do that? Or, yeah.
Hang on. I went home and I thought
Yeah.
Yeah. about it, and maybe that's not a good idea, or at
Yes,
least
like
it's not a good approach.
we got ahead of ourselves. This is a bigger thing. If we're really going to do this, we need to treat it as a bigger thing to respect what it really is.
Yeah, 100%. One last question for you, Gena.
Mhm.
For founders and leaders building in complex environments, what's one belief or assumption you had to unlearn that made your work more effective?
Yeah. I think that one thing I have gotten better at that has served me well is having less answers, and that the internal dynamics of what's happening within an organization, let that have a bigger weight than I used to. I think I used to really be much more tool oriented than I am now. And it could even be in the context of there are so many more tools now too, so that has changed. But that the kind of the internal dynamics, the readiness, the process of people, that has now a much, much bigger weight than whatever the system it is that we're looking at evaluating. And so how do people's jobs change? Do some jobs even still exist when a new tool is rolled out? Or how do departments need to work together in a different way than they did before? There's a lot of mapping there, just respecting that things take time. And I think some conversations that I've had with organizations where I've pointed out that what it is that you're looking to achieve and implement in your organization is more complex than what you see it is, because of all these other things that are going to need to happen. I will say that that's not always been well received or welcomed, because it's like, no, we just need this tool. It's going to be fine. Can you set it up for us or not? I mean, like, obviously they don't say that, but it kind of has that vibe. And that especially in the context of, there are so many options, everything is better, expectations are really high of what can be done. There's a lot of kind of critical thinking and relationship building and trust that must be achieved and developed within organizations for any kind of tool to be effectively used. And so as, technology implementer and supporter, having that kind of awareness has been really, really critical for that long-term stability and satisfaction and incremental improvement within organizations that maybe feels like less transformative, because you see that change over the time, but it's a lot more sustainable. And so we try to take it seriously of what our role is in kind of educating or pointing out some of those things that need to be considered that are not necessarily technical decisions that are being made.
Thank you for sharing that. Gena, thank you so much for an honest and grounded conversation. It's been a real pleasure having you here, being the first female on the podcast.
Yeah.
Unpacking all of this with you, and I truly appreciate you making the time to be here on the SaaS Playbook.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Jenny. It's great to be here.